There are studies that focus on the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on firms' performance, and in particular their international relations. However, a deep analysis of exporters operating in different industries and performing different types of activities has been neglected or delayed due to a lack of sufficient data. In order to fill this identified research gap, we undertook a study. The aim of this paper is to determine the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on firms' exports, both performance and prospects, across different types of economic activities and industries. We put forward a general research question of whether sectoral or industrial business specificity matters when it comes to the impact of the pandemic on businesses' performance. In relation to this general question, several research hypotheses were formulated, the first of which concerns the varying effects of the pandemic by industry. Hypothesis 1. The impact of the pandemic varies depending on the industry in which the company operates. Taking into consideration the existing studies on the impact of the pandemic on businesses' general condition, the second hypothesis was formulated in relation to companies' export performance. Hypothesis 2. The value of exports during the pandemic depended on the nature of the company's activities. Due to the different approaches, classifications, and the scope of economic activity that the companies conducted, 3 detailed hypotheses were drawn up with the reference to hypothesis 2. The last hypothesis addressed the predictions of export performance made by the exporters. Hypothesis 3. The export prospects for 2022 depend on the nature of their business. The hypothesis 3 was also looked at in detail using 3 more detailed ones. The research is based on quantitative primary data gathered with the use of standardized questionnaire from Polish exporting companies. The survey was conducted on a representative sample of 350 exporters. The random sample was stratified according to the size of companies, measured by the number of employees and the main types of economic activity. The questions were designed to capture information from businesses regardless of the economic sector they operate in. The interviews were conducted by phone between the 14th and 21st July 2021. We analyzed the survey sample data statistically. For the categorical variables, the frequencies and percentages were calculated, while for Likert scale data, the values of the basic descriptive statistics such as mean, median, quartiles, standard deviation, and coefficient of variation were established. Next, the relationship between the categorical variables was examined using Pearson's non-parametric chi-square test of independence. The distribution of the tested variables in the subgroups, obtained by dividing the sample according to the main type of economic activity, its diversification and industry, were compared using the non-parametric Kruskal-Wallis test. For the 2 subgroups, the Matten-Whitney test was used. Studying the impact of the pandemic across industries, the respondents in the survey were asked to rate the impact of the pandemic on the industry in which their companies primarily operate. In the responses options, a 5-point Likert scale was used. Table includes descriptive statistics for the whole sample and for particular industries. The indicated mean values are close to each other and the median is almost the same regardless of industry. The standard deviation also confirms the quite high similarity among the cases. The respondents were asked to assess how the pandemic had affected the value of their export transactions compared to market forecasts for the same period in the absence of a pandemic. The aggregated results are presented in the figure you see on the slide. More than half of the enterprises taking part in the survey did not notice a significant deviation from normal. Changes were within the range of ±5%. To verify hypotheses 2A, B, and C, we applied the chi-square test for independence. The results of the chi-square test show that only hypothesis 2A was statistically confirmed as the p-value is smaller than the significance level of 0.05. Therefore, we reject the hypothesis of independence in this case. Thus, it can be concluded that during the first phase of the pandemic, the value of exports was dependent on the main type of economic activity which the company carried out. Exporters were asked to rate their company's export prospects for 2022 on a 5-point Likert scale, where 1 stood for a very negative and 5 for a very positive assessment, assuming global pandemic restrictions were lifted. The obtained data indicates very high optimism among the entrepreneurs studied regarding export opportunities in 2022. The vast majority of respondents assessed the prospects as good, with the next most numerous group assessing them as a very good. Evaluation of export prospects is used as a variable to test the H3A, B, and C hypothesis, and its descriptive statistics were calculated. The data presented in table, especially the observed differences in the mean values between some industries, for example, others and transport and storage services on the one hand, and beauty, chemical and pharmaceutical or metallic, plastic, rubber and non-metallic mineral products on the other hand, point to interesting discrepancies. As in the case of the data concerning different industries, promising discrepancies between the mean values can be observed for different types of economic activity. Moreover, the descriptive statistics of a company's export prospects for 2022 were analyzed across different companies, taking into account how diverse their economic activity is. The mean value for the analyzed variable is not promising in terms of economic activity diversification. Both the dependencies between export perspectives and the industry in which a given company operates and the company's dominant type of activity were verified using the Kruskal-Wallis test. The result showed that the evaluation of the company's export prospects depends statistically significantly on the industry in which the company operates, and also depends on the company's dominant type of business. In turn, the result of Mann-Whitney test showed that the degree of diversification of a company's activities does not affect the assessment of the company's export prospects for 2022. One of the interesting results of this study is that it did not confirm the varying impact of the pandemic across industries. This is an unexpected finding which can be explained by the fact that even industries with demand growth during the pandemic also experienced other problems like supply disruptions or simply instability. Moreover, the assessment of the impact of the pandemic on business performance may depend on the individual market position and strategy pursued by each company. When it comes to the impact of the pandemic on export performance, the results of the statistical analysis led to the conclusion that the main type of economic activity which the companies conduct did matter, but that their diversification and the industry in which a company operates did not. This means that only the type of activity determined export performance during the pandemic. However, the export prospects for the year 2022 are determined not only by main types of economic activity but also by industry. Our results are not fully in line with what was expected. which may be due to several reasons. This survey was conducted in 2021, more than a year after the pandemic began, and by this time more complete effects of the pandemic may have been apparent. Thus, export performance across industries may be determined more by other factors than the demand and supply shocks caused by the pandemic. However, the distinction between production, service, retail and wholesale may be a key differentiator of the impact of the pandemic. Thank you for your attention.